I work with partners across the country that help promote and support Winter Salt Week. So really wouldn't be doing this here without all of the support of the organizations that you see in this slide. And I want to give a special shout out today to the Isaac Walton League. They're one of our gold sponsors. So if you haven't seen or been in touch with Isaac Walton League yet, you had the opportunity to on Friday. Abby Heilman, who runs the Salt Watch program, did speak during Winter Salt Week last year. She kicked off the week, actually, I believe, on Monday. And this week she'll be talking on Friday about advocating for change in your communities. So shout out to Isaac Walton League for their support. So with that, I think I'll be turning over to Phil now to get started and pull up his slides, and then we'll transition to Aaron and we'll take questions at the end. But feel free to share any questions, comments that you have in the chat during the live stream today. So Aaron, I think you and I can both mute then, and Phil, your slides are up, so you're good to go.
Awesome. Thanks. And shout out to everybody, especially I heard there's some folks signed in from the Adirondacks. I'm sitting in my home office, not just outside of Lake Placid, and looking out the window we've had a bunch of beautiful powdery snow. So if anybody's wanting to come ski here, this is the best time because usually Whiteface Mountain is usually Iceface Mountain. So this week it's finally powdery. Um, Just trying to advance my slides here. Hold on 1 minute. Here we go. Okay. So just a little bit about us real quickly. We've been in the winter management space, our firm Wood Advisors, for nearly a couple of decades now, but I've worked as a practitioner for those of you that don't know me for actually I'm in my fourth decade, so it's been over 35 years. Started plowing snow back in 1989, and I was just telling a friend the other day, for some reason, I still have the bug, right? I got bit by the bug a long time ago. So it's an exciting business for us. And it's an interesting time when it comes to salt for a lot of different reasons. There's a problem that needs to be solved. I think in a lot of ways, Allison, you're one of the great people that are connecting everybody on this. I sort of consider salt as a conduit or a conductor to sort of addressing this industry and how we can all sort of collaborate together. So thanks for that. We basically have been involved with salt in a couple different ways. I've partnered over the years with the Snow and Ice Management Association. We several years ago created a sustainable salt initiative, which is really just meant to help enable a way for us to sort of measure at a standards level how salt's being applied, application rates, methods, those types of things. And then the thing that we've been most focused on over the years is we developed a program called the Sustainable Winter Management Program. And that's really coalesces really all the best practices, and that really requires standards of policy in order to enable standards of practice. So we're very mission driven on this for a couple of main reasons: protecting water. But I think that, goes in line with protecting our future. So there's a lot of things that the salt issue sort of causes, not only with water, but with infrastructure, as I think we all know. And so really when we're applying every granular, every ton of salt, it costs more than sort of what the per ton rate is, right? And so it's really within the thousands of dollars rather than hundreds of dollars. So briefly, what SWIM is several things, but it's again, first, standards of policy that enable standards of practice. It's a multi-phase sort of continuous improvement loop that we try to put it through, and that's really why the standards of policy that you see on the right-hand side of the screen, we put that through what you'd consider continuous improvement. We incorporate in our program lots of data, so it's really very property or road specific. Includes measuring things like level of service, application rates, material outputs, bare pavement recovery, and so it's really taking what we may have always considered a bit more of a simple standard and putting it in terms of everything that needs to be measured, not only just the salt, but including the salt. Decisions are made at a data-driven level. We're measuring outputs again. We're measuring level of service. We're measuring bare pavement recovery and understanding how salt is incorporated with that. Compliance is really through that measuring and monitoring. And then training is really the key. It's just an ongoing continuous improvement loop where we in our business, we verify that this is happening both at a continuous improvement and service verification level. The way that the standards look like, this sort of looks like an overwhelming view, but this is everything that we're looking for when we're verifying or certifying that everything possible that can be done. And this is done in a multi-phase, multi-season approach. But the simple way to look at it again is the standards of policy are simple enough in that first and foremost, we need to measure that which we want to improve. Calibration, not only salt calibration or material calibration, but we're calibrating a lot of things, including how we calibrate decision making, when to dispatch, when to decide to send a crew out, things of that nature. Prevention, I think the single most important one is preventing the bond. So prevent the bond, prevent the bond, prevent the bond is really the key ingredient, in addition to calibration of salt output. Because you've probably heard it many times, but the way that I've always liked to frame it that I heard years ago is it's similar to looking at a non-stick frying pan, right? And if we don't actually do something preventatively, spray Pam on it, or whatever it is, what is that cleanup process going to look like? Um, Takes, that scrub, more soap, more scrub, and that's what our world is in the parking lot or in the roadway world is every time that we miss the opportunity to prevent that bond, it's just requiring more to break the bond. More salt, more scrape, add more salt, more scrape. And I know that Aaron, in what he's going to discuss, really talks about that at a practical level. And then I think, with measuring and with data collection, that provides the possibility or the opportunities to learn at a per event, per application view where are we seeing anomalies? Where are we seeing variations? So if you thought about it from a contractor's point of view or a municipal point of view, there's lots of trucks out there applying salt. And even though we might have the same exact salt spreader and the same exact salt and the same exact gate setting, it doesn't mean that the same exact amount of salt's coming out. So all those machines, all those applicators actually behave differently. And so that's our opportunity right there in itself to improve sort of where those anomalies or where those differences are in a fleet. And then from there, it's just we look at it from an improvement and optimization phase. So where can we improve methodologies, incorporating anti-icing, incorporating direct liquid application of brine, for example, incorporating in segmented plow technology, all those things that can then further optimize the simple ways that we already have to reduce our salt use without necessarily changing our entire operation or infrastructure. So the way that swim looks, if whenever we have the opportunity or the pleasure of helping someone, we look through it through the lens of a multi-season approach. First, just starting with what we call season zero, just the discovery phase. And so I like to share this little slide of everyone because anyone can do this. Anyone can take this approach in their operation, as long as there's a willingness to understand that there's always waste in the system. And so a lot of that's very much a philosophical or culturally embedded idea. But what Swim does really is it just takes all the best practices that are already at play, and systematizes it and puts it into a timeline of where you may want to approach things first. So for us, again, we start with a discovery process, move into what are the best ways that we can actually collect data and analyze it, and then starting normally in sort of that third season, or what we call season two, is an intervention phase where we can start to phase in different types of materials. We're big on even chloride-free materials, different types of equipment and methodologies. Um, so the simple way to look at it is, particularly at a contractor's point of view, those that are servicing the private sector, but this certainly applies in the municipal setting as well, as there's an awful lot of time and material contract models that still exist in the industry, for example. And that's where we try to focus on changing that at a policy level. So if you're a property owner that may be listening in, a lot of times your contract is policy, right? That's the policy that the contractor, or even at a municipal level, needs to follow. And so if a lot of that policy is based on quantities, your opportunity is sort of move it into a service-based or performance-based specifications. And then we incorporate a lot of technology, site weather stations, GPS-enabled salt metering. We're big on the prevention of the bond, as I shared, and then, getting into that improvement optimization phase. So, there's quite a bit of proof case now that we've become more confident about over the years. We've been working mostly on salt reduction initiatives for a little over a decade now. And we have consistently, over time, normally in a between a 2 and 5 year phase, and depending on the operation and where they are in the process, we're seeing consistently 50% reduction. Municipalities, contractors, up to 3 times reduction, particularly in retail settings, we find that's a huge opportunity. And so, broadly speaking, that's a huge cost control mechanism. If you think about what's going on with salt right now and the salt shortages, that's a huge way to hedge your bets. When it comes to risk control, we've generally seen across the board a reduction in slip and fall claims. And that's something that we've been testing for a number of years to make sure that there's not some sort of an unintended consequence. So I just want to give confidence to that, if and when you have the willingness and the ability to follow these standards of policy, um, if there's ever a question if there might be an unintended consequence related to liability, we've not experienced one yet. And if anything, it's been proven that it's actually helping to reduce those claims. And then, the end result that we are really after is reduction of chloride loading in the water, right? Drinking water sources, open fresh water sources, anything that's fresh water. So I would just want to sort of leave folks with the idea that a lot of this salt usage is culturally embedded, right? It's really our mindsets and the way that things have been done for decades. And so I would just sort of ask, as a call to action to all of us that are involved in salt application, or that influence it is, number one, for us to really keep in our minds and sort of help train others that even though we're allowed to use this stuff, it is a pollutant, right? And I think, to me, from our experience, even at a legislative level, that train sort of left the station, right? So this will continue to be regulated, I believe, over time. And in some places, like in New York, we're already on that path. Contracts, really should be based on preparedness versus quantity based. Level of service, we should be looking at achieving level of service with methods and different types of methods and technology that are available now versus with just burning it off with salt. Decision making being data enabled, versus sort of a set it and forget it, standard. That is way more available to us now at a very affordable level as an industry than it ever has before. And then really setting standards for accountability. And that's using that data, using that type of technology to further verify, through the measuring and monitoring processes that are available. Training, one big one that I see with the clients that we work with at a contractor level is, we are very much an emergency readiness service, right? So I've always said we're the first responders of the first responders. And so I see that there's a call to action, particularly for service providers, to behave similar to emergency service operations, where there's always a post event, or in this case for us, a post storm and a post season review process that always helps. And so happy for anybody to reach out to us and understand how we do that. That's something that we love to share with folks. And then, in our world, we certify, we certify or we verify that continuous improvement, and that verification of that of services being done, right? And so, because it's very simple to sort of get started and then jump off back off the bandwagon again, and we see that happen a lot. And so, where we'd like to play a role is just sort of in helping with that accountability. So that's really where we've been helpful for the industry, I think. So with that, I'll turn it over to Aaron, but I did just want to pop up my email. If there's so much to share, and I could go on for hours about it if anybody's interested. But my email is there if you want to reach out, and I'm happy to share more specific details or information to help you.
Awesome. Thank you, Phil. Yes, if you end the screen share, we can have Aaron take over here.
Boy, I can echo what Phil says, but I could go on for hours about that. I think the biggest challenge I've had recently is Allison telling me I have 10 minutes and then I need to allow some time for questions afterwards. So I'm going to hammer through this. I'm more of the boots on the ground, hands-on side here. I made a bit of a change to what we're going to talk about because of the current salt shortage. So everybody, real quick, grab your pencil, grab a sheet of paper. I got a couple things you're going to want to write down. So while you're grabbing that, I'm just going to give you a little bit of street cred. Why listen to me? We just cover one city, West Bend, Wisconsin. We plow about 70% of the commercial pavement here and some of the municipal pavement as well. We run 70 guys per storm. We go through about 3,000 tons a year, 250 plus acres of snow. Been doing it, or 250 plus acres of pavement. 25 years we've been doing this. We've been working with Saltwise about 10 years ago, 8 to 10 years, somewhere in there. This stuff works. I was not sold. The rest of my employees, they drank the Kool-Aid and were like, Aaron, you got to take some of this too. And I'm like, no, I got to take care of our customers. This isn't the way to go. They got me on board. It's good Kool-Aid. It really is. These practices work. They're incredibly more sustainable for the environment, and they're incredibly profitable. I mean, incredibly profitable for your company. So just real quick, current state of salt, it's out. I mean, it's not physically out on the earth. Logistically, it's out. We start the season getting it from the port in Milwaukee for $80 a ton. That's 40-minute drive. We are sourcing it at $175 a ton, so more than double, and it'll probably be going up again. 15 hours away. We've gone from being able to get it 40 minutes away to traveling 15 hours to get our salt brought in here. I've always said there's no secrets in the snow industry. I like that we all share. I finally found one. I'm not telling anyone where we got our salt because I don't want it to disappear. But in my 25 years, that's the first secret in the snow industry. So what I want to talk to you guys about today, quickly here, is what can you do tomorrow? There's a lot of and I'm not talking the proverbial tomorrow. I'm talking about Wednesday and Thursday and Friday. Like, what can you pick up in this 10 minutes? I've used some of it. I got 7 minutes to change how you run your operations, whether that's a municipality or a contracting company or a school. There's really simple ways to do it. And they could save you thousands and thousands. They'll make a huge difference. They'll take your stress level down a bit. So first couple things on how to stretch what you got for salt, or stretch what is available, or stretch, if you're being told what you got, you have something available, I would say best case scenario, expect 50% of it. It's not coming. It's just that straightforward. We just personally, out of our own salt shed, restocked the school district, the municipality, because the school district can't even get the salt that's been allocated to them. We're seeing other municipalities having the same problem. People are pulling from our shed. We're north of Milwaukee. People are pulling from our shed up from Wausau down to Indiana. It's crazy. So a couple real quick things. I see guys pull into my shed that have pre-wet systems on their salters that never use it. You can, by pre-wetting your salt, that would be pre-wetting is having the brine tank on your truck that sprays it onto the salt as it's falling out of between the auger chains and the spinner. So about 4 to 6 gallons per ton are going on there. You're gonna use like $20 worth of brine and save yourself like $250 in salt that evening. Your salt will go 30% further if you do that. If you don't have one on, almost everyone's got an aftermarket kit for their salter now. Call your dealer. Honestly, by next Monday, they can probably have one installed. And you can find places to buy a tote of brine or to pick up brine to fill it up. If that's a little too much of an issue or too difficult, you can buy pre-treated salt. The stuff you see that's blue or purple or green. It's usually about $20 a ton extra. And same thing, it's going to stretch your salt usage by about 20%. So you pay $20 a ton extra, but can cover 20% more pavement with the same amount of pounds. And then that also goes into your labor because you can now salt 20% more places before you got to come back and fill up. Another area is, and this a little bit of a gray area, but something to consider. This is, worst case scenario, you don't have enough salt to get through the winter. You're going to have to back off on some of the pre-treating. Especially on the warmer days, or just pre-treat the aisles, the handicap spots, front of the stores. We take care of lots of big box stores, lots of 12-acre parking lots where, with the exception of Black Friday, 5 of those 12 acres are commonly used. So maintain exceptional service and salt practices on that 5 acres, and just back down on the other 7 on the back half. And have some fun with it. Start seeing how far you can back down on the back half of the parking lot before you notice any difference, before a customer notices any difference. I would put money that the majority of the people listening, not the ones listening, the majority of the contractors and municipalities out there, their tonnage per acre could be cut in half and you would see no difference. The only possible difference might be you have bare pavement at 7:30 a.m. instead of 6:45. So keep the 6:45 area salted how you need it, and then back down on the areas where no one parks anyways. Let the sun have a little time to hit it, work on it, and use that as a starting point. And you're going to start to see, we could probably salt the front of the store the same as we salted the back. What you're going to find is probably, these really melted at about the same time. The only difference is the front of the store has enough salt left on it to melt the next 2 storms, and the back half doesn't have a ton of salt on it still. Something else we're doing, number 1 would be live edge plows. I'll skip naming the brands, but we're talking 2-foot sections that individually pivot, rock, raise up and down. No more straight 12-foot rubber cutting edge, steel cutting edge, 16-foot cutting edges. They got to be, I think, active edge or live edge is the industry term. Your Arctics, your Metal Pluses, your Douglas Dynamics plows. I guess I did name names. Sorry. But the scrape you're going to get on there is going to reduce. It's going to be so clean that you can cut your salt usage down tremendously. We've also started plowing anything that's 1/2 inch or over. We used to just bake off a 1/2 inch, 3/4 inches snow. No more. Not when our salt price is 2.5 times what we started with. It's actually working great. Our plowers are happy. They're getting more hours in to come plow. We're getting them through plowing cycles more often, so better training, a better scrape, and then all we need is a skim coat of salt afterwards. It's going great. From a billing standpoint, we get to bill an extra plowing too. It's going. We like that. Let's see, what else do we got here? Start experimenting. A lot of these practices, like my hesitation was, I don't want my customers to notice a difference. I don't want there to be a slip and fall. you know what? Now it's a little more of an extreme circumstance. If you have a customer who tells you, "Hey, it seems like you're not salting as heavy," you know, you've got a scapegoat. Yeah, I'm sorry, we didn't pre-salt or didn't salt as heavy this time because there. If you see in the news, there's a salt shortage. Even the municipalities don't have salt. We're trying to make sure we can get through the year. We don't want to use up all the salt now, so then we leave you guys unsafe later in the year. So you've got a scapegoat. Start trying some things. I mean, if you don't even implement anything in equipment, all you got to do is keep the auger setting where you normally got it on the front half of the back of the parking lot, and then just turn it down 2 or 3 clicks for the back half, and just watch. You got to start trying some of this stuff. You know, don't choose to do that on your handicap parking stalls, your employee parking stalls in the front of the store. Do your experimenting on the back half of the lot, and then start moving your way forward. Your customers will not notice a difference. Salt meters. This is huge. There's an old saying, you can't manage what you can't measure. The old standard of looking in the back of your hopper and saying, I think I used half a ton on that, 400 pounds, 3 tons. We put meters on our trucks, and what one guy thought was 1 ton, someone else was calling 3 tons, and someone else was calling 650 pounds. There was zero continuity from operator to operator. Couple of the bigger name guys have salt meters now that, I mean, Western just came out with one that goes right onto their salters. That's $600. You swap out the controller. I think Boss has one now. Hilltip has one. I mean, $600, you're going to save that in one night. I mean, it is an absolute no-brainer. And with that, you can do bigger steps that'll take you into next week and the week after. You measure up your parking lots, figure out, okay, I only want 250 pounds per acre on this site. You measure it up, you leave a chart in your vehicle. And so now each of your operators knows that this Walmart, it gets 3,250 pounds. And they've got a meter there telling them whether they're putting too much down or too little. So we can now put any operator in the salter and get the same results and have the right amount of salt put down. There's a lot you can do with brine. Not even going to get into it because it's not happening this week. Brine, it's doable, but it takes some planning. And if you're just starting it, it also takes contingency plans for if you screw it up. It's worth getting into it. By the time you'd have to order a sprayer, figure out where you're getting your brine. It is feasible to do that yet this year. It's pretty cool that there's enough winter left that you can start to implement some of these things. And I encourage you guys to look into what you can do with brine. But honestly, even more is using the salt, the bulk salt that you have more wisely. I think that's going to be much more beneficial. And with that, I'm going to close. And if you got your pens handy, Andy, because I went pretty quick here. You have questions on this that we don't get a chance to hit in the next 5 minutes. My email, it's aaron@extramilesnow.com. 1A in Aaron, AAronExtramilesnow.com. Or you can even call me on my cell to talk about this. 262-373-6564. That's how passionate I am about this. That's how bummed I am that I only have 10 minutes. But from there, I'll open it up to Allison's questions.
Thank you, Aaron. Well, you don't have to be too bummed because remember, I'm going to have you back on again later this year to talk about brining sidewalks. So you get more time for that one. But I did just put your email into the chat, so folks have that. I'm not going to put your phone number in the chat because we don't need bots, scrubbing that off the internet. Turk just said, well done, Aaron. Great tomorrow takeaways to implement immediately. We also had another great presentation. This is great info. Couple questions here coming up, and would encourage people to type more questions into the chat if you have a few minutes to hang around. So the most recent one that I see says, it's also been too cold for salt to work effectively, isn't it? Like at temperatures below 15, or what is the cutoff that you guys use? And then do you use sand or another product? What do you use instead?
Is that for me?
Sure. I mean, can hit you first and then go to Phil. Yeah.
Okay. So can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. So there's technical cutoffs. You can melt salt or you can melt snow and ice far below 15 degrees. We've done it with just straight salt, even as cold as 5, if there's sun on it, and also if there's some vehicle traffic. Something external to add a little bit of heat there. If you're pre-wetting or pre-treating your salt, we've done it below 0. It is doable, and it's doable without putting on a ridiculous amount. That's also where brine comes in handy. The brine, if you have brining capabilities, you can melt it way below that. You can put a little salt down and top dress it with a little bit from your brine truck, or you can actually just hit it with the brine truck and melt through. So it's doable, but it's probably even more important to realize where it's not doable, because I do see time and time again, people just, well, I would have normally put down 1,000 pounds, but I'm going to put down 4,000 pounds because it's cold. If it's not melting, more salt isn't going to make it melt more. It needs to start brining up, and then it would just use your regular application rates regardless of temperature.
I think like for somebody, Phil, why don't you jump in first, then I have a couple comments.
Well, I agree with everything Aaron said, and I'll just the rule of thumb that I always try to teach in a simple way, if we can, is just remember 15.5 minus 25. So 15 degrees is when traditional rock salt or sodium chloride is most effective. It will work down to, I say, more like around 10 before then you may be just wasting effort, or it requires you to then blend magnesium chloride. Oh, and the other thing to think about is scientifically, sodium chloride is what's called an endothermic process when it reacts with moisture. So it's lowering the freeze point of water on the surface below 32 degrees, effectively down to about 15, but you can get a little bit lower. Lots of folks are blending or pre-wetting, as what Aaron said. That's probably the best method to both activate salt and then lower that freeze point effectiveness down below that 15, down to about 5 degrees. And that's, that magnesium chloride, a lot of folks call it a hot blend, but that's actually creating an exothermic, or it's creating heat, right? So you've got the two, endothermic and exothermic, working together now. And then if you have to get colder than that, then that's when calcium chloride is usually effective down to about minus 25. So that's where a lot of the blending and the science comes into play. Again, these are things, I love what Aaron's saying about if you already have saddle tanks on that spreader you bought, use the heck out of it, man, because that's gonna save you. Anytime you implement some of these practices or those policies, there's usually about a 20% reduction opportunity. And that's why I say, if you put it all into play, you could be actually reducing your salt by 3 times, believe it or not. And we've seen it.
Certainly.
Yeah.
And for saddle tanks, for folks who aren't in the industry, that means tanks that are holding some brine to do that pre-wetting that Aaron talked about, spraying the brine on the salt. So people consider it kind of like activated, it's going to start melting immediately. So then I was going to comment, if someone's talking about like doing their sidewalk, like you don't have necessarily vehicle traffic up and down, right? And it's like paying attention to like, do you have the sun that Aaron mentioned or not? If the salt isn't melting, then yeah, switching to sand is kind of what Saltwise recommends there for your own personal kind of sidewalk or driveway at colder temperatures when regular salt isn't that effective. So we got a question about Maryland has switched to only using brine. And have either of you heard of this? Kind of what are your thoughts? I guess I question if they're only using brine, maybe they're using some brine, right, for direct liquid applications, but yeah, do you guys want to share a little bit?
I can just tell you from experience, I think they're using only brine as a pre-treat or an anti-ice application. last I was in Maryland for a snowstorm, which was just, very recently. There's still granular salt being applied as well. Yeah. And there's pre-wetting I've seen as well. So I'm not sure that I could say that's a Maryland wide thing, but I do believe from observation it is all brine for anti-icing or pre-treating. Yeah.
So definitely for pre-treating, kind of like before an event, putting just straight brine down does what Phil said, kind of like that pan cooking spray, making the non-stick surface. So that, as someone just asked, looks like Doug, the goal isn't to melt the snow and ice with that. The goal is to prevent that bond from forming so that you can plow it up a lot more easily. And then not need as much salt on the back end.
I would want to just add to them because that's been the problem, particularly with brine anti-icing, how it's being sold is I think we're selling it with an expectation that it's going to burn off, accumulation in the beginning and buy us time, which if all the weather conditions are aligned, sometimes that happens, but the expectation should be it's preventing the bond so you have a cleaner scrape. So you should expect more of a slush layer that's created, not necessarily get rid of accumulation. Because that's when I hear a lot of people say like, oh yeah, this brine stuff doesn't work. It's like it is actually doing it was what it's supposed to do normally.
I would add to that too, that if you couple that with start plowing anything that's half inch or more, because putting the brine down, we found, and expecting it to melt like 3/4 of an inch, it doesn't do it. But if we're putting brine down ahead of time, but knowing that we're going to plow anything over a half inch, we're a bit safer there. And then also about the Maryland and all brine, there are some climates that can do that. We've talked with some different companies where you have a drier snow and not much of a risk of ice storms. Minnesota would be an example. It's not picking up the moisture from the Great Lakes. Actually, realistically, probably Minnesota on west. There are some companies out there that do, and maybe even municipalities that are 100% brine. Great Lakes states, and actually even through the south where you get ice storms, I think you could probably be 90% brine, but I think you're always going to have a hopper and some salt sitting there in case you get, a 1/4 inch, half inch of glare ice, because the brine does not go through the ice.
Would chime in there to say we had a webinar with Bill Kern from Jefferson County. He's recently retired as the county highway commissioner, and they did a lot of experimentation with direct liquid application, which for those of you not in the industry, that means just brine only before, during, and after the storm. And he said, like in 90% of the storms, they were more efficient by using brine than any granular salt or granular that was pre-wet. But in 10% of the storms, they ended up going out and putting more salt down in brine form just because they couldn't keep up with it. Because like Aaron said, just the quality of the snow, it's high moisture content. It wasn't enough, didn't have enough power to keep burning through that accumulation. But that said, I do know a contractor in Madison who is brine only. And during an ice event, he was like, it's rough. He just had to keep going around, but he always says a treated brine, which helped a bit. But yeah, he acknowledges it wasn't the smartest, right? But that's kind of where he's at. Someone just said they're now 100% brine on sidewalks only, which I think, Aaron, that's kind of what you do, right? Pretty much brine on sidewalks.
Yes, with the exception of an ice storm. If there's an ice storm, we got our spreaders and our bags of salt. But if it's not an ice storm, we are 100% brine on sidewalks, and our customers love it. Our employees like it. It's instant bare pavement the second you spray it on there.
And then they're not tracking it into the stores, right?
Correct. And on your sand, you had brought up sand before. About 15 years ago, we had a shortage, and we tried some salt mixed with sand. That's going to totally depend on your culture in your area. Northern Wisconsin, no problem. Mountain states, probably no problem. Milwaukee area where we are, my customers flipped. All the sand gets tracked into their building, and then their maintenance costs were through the roof. There was sand everywhere, sand in their carpets, sand on their furniture. And then in the spring, there was sand around all the parking lot. And they're like, well, who cleans this up? Does the snow guy clean it up? Do we have to clean it up? So in our locale, it didn't fly, but in others, it does.
I would just want to add too, for brine only, because it's possible from our experience anywhere, but there has to be policy standards put in place. So like Aaron's policy of half-inch or greater clearing snow, you have to do that. Otherwise, brine only wouldn't be an option for you. And then understanding the conditions, like you said, Allison, of the moisture content. Maryland is a very wet snow almost no matter what, right? And so 6 inches of snow there is like 2 feet of snow of powder up where I am, right? So that, it's not about the inches, it's about the moisture. And then I would think on sidewalks, just from our experience, that has to be you have to clear it all policy. So it's like it has to be shoveled first. You can't just rely on burning it off at any accumulation level is how we see it. Broom and brines are the best combination tool on sidewalks if whenever possible. And what I mean by broom is rotating, not just somebody doing this, right? But yeah, you can do it, but I'm not going to recommend it.
After I shovel, then I go with my old broom. A very, very short sidewalk right now, which I'm grateful for. All right, so there were a few questions kind of early on here. I don't want to totally skip over. Looks like from someone in upstate New York, who is curious about open data on salt applications on public roads, particularly the Indian Lake area. So Phil, I think kind of wondering if you might be able to speak to that. And they also are curious if if you have recommendations on how to connect with local operators if their town or DOT supervisors are reluctant to reduce salt use. So
Yeah.
kind of a twofer there.
Well, definitely email me if you want individually. I served on the governor's Adirondacks Road Salt Reduction Task Force. We've talked a lot about that was a recommended policy that we suggested as the open data source. It doesn't exist right now. We facilitate Adirondack Action's Clean Water Safe Roads Initiative. So that would definitely be part of it. We're really the connectors to all of those municipalities, or at least we try. So um, is there reluctance? Yes. Is it everyone? No. And so it sort of depends community to community who that is. A lot of these folks are elected officials, and so there is some hesitancy to make change when whatever is working now works, because with any change, there's always some sort of a fear, right? And so I would again say contact me directly. Maybe we can put that in the chat again, and I can speak with you further about it. Yeah, you can always try and ask, right? You can always try and ask, but we've definitely been trying to help in that region in particular.
Thanks, Phil. Question about, have either of you had experience using any alternative de-icing agents? The person put in such as cheese brine or beet juice. And maybe you guys want to speak to why beet juice is not an alternative on its own.
Paper, rock, scissors for it here.
Yeah. You win. Go.
I have not, because we've just heard too many horror stories from, and again, some of the things you're mentioning are additives that are used not for their melting properties, but to either reduce corrosivity or to make it stickier so that it has a longer last, so that they can put it down a couple days beforehand. I think the answer to this question might be a little different based on locality and municipality. If you're right next to a cheese factory, we're in Wisconsin, go ahead, try it out. But some of these products on the commercial end, some of them have colors or scents that the customers are not okay with. Some of them have solids in them that fill up, that clog up filters right away on the machinery or the sprayer nozzle tips. We've been trying to get as simple as possible with the brine. It's like these products are like the Wild West. Everybody's got their own magic heat blend for $6 a gallon, but no one will give you, there's no proof of I forget what the word is, but there, you don't get an MSDS sheet that lets you know that there is this percent this in, this percent that, this percent that. And the same is true with bag salt and the blends on there. There's no ingredient list, and they all use the word safer, and none of that is really that truthful. So we've been sticking with sodium chloride, salt brine. We use a liquid calcium chloride product in it. And for us, that's it. We've tried different things. That's on our end, that's been the least expensive. It's not the magic bullet for everyone. For us, we're only putting it down within typically 24 hours of snow. So I don't need an additive that's going to make it stick a long time. The corrosivity, there's inhibitors you can put in there. Some people might like, or if you're doing municipal bridge work and things like that, where there's a lot of metals, so it's not going to be one size fits all. Those are possibilities, but I would start simple. Start with something that's proven and that works, or that someone else shared with you and they know works. Use their legwork, get a system down, and then from there start implementing. You know what? We're going to try some cheese brine in this batch, and we're only going to use it on that parking lot on that route. Start implementing those things on a small scale. And if they work great, start moving them in. But if they don't, then you didn't ruin anything. It's just one little spot where you tried it.
Great. So I'm trying to answer a lot of other questions here. We've got one more comment, which I actually heard from somebody earlier today, that brine more quickly corrodes vehicles and equipment. So this is somebody, it looks like from Ohio, who said communities in their area have been using brine for a long time, but now some are abandoning it because it corrodes vehicles and equipment more so than regular rock salt. Do you guys want to speak to that? That myth, I will say.
I'll take that one off your back, Eric.
Yeah.
We've been using brine for as long as rock salt's being used. So rock salt has to convert to a brine before it actually lowers freeze point of water on the surface. And so that's a myth, period. If anything, when we're using traditional rock salt and allowing that to convert to a brine, that's actually probably been in higher volume. So it's a lower volume, higher concentrate, lower volume when you're using brine, and it's being used way more efficiently. And all of it's being applied on the surface we want to actually target, rather than you see it anytime you drive behind a salt truck on the highway, you see where at least 25% of the salt goes. It goes on the side of the road. But that salt's also being put down at a higher quantity. So when it does convert to that brine, that's actually what you want to be concerned with. So brine is actually a strategy to reduce that volume of brine on the road once it actually converts to that moisture again. So those white chalky lines in the road then convert back to the brine, let's say, but at a much lower quantity. So total myth.
Do you want to speak to that?
I would agree with that too. In fact, that I don't even know how you could do a case study on it, because anytime you drive a vehicle down the road, all that salty slush, which is brine, gets flung up all over your vehicle. And I think it might actually be misguiding. I think the real issue is probably crappier paint jobs on equipment and vehicles than what we used to have in the past. I mean, that I think is causing things to rust out a bit faster than the differences in chlorides.
Lighter vehicles, right? They're more fuel efficient, but they don't handle winter as well. I would add that, the way I try to conceptualize this, which I usually have visuals for, is a municipality kind of like historically wasn't even measuring, and some still don't, right, measure how much salt they put down per lane mile. As people started to measure and do some early calibration, 300 pounds of salt per lane mile is kind of the standard. And now we have a lot of municipalities that are bringing that down by utilizing brine for some pre-treatment of the roads, pre-wetting, are bringing their salt use down to between 100, 200 pounds per lane mile. So let's say we used to be at like 500. Some people still are. Some people put down more than 500 pounds a lane mile of salt, to the 300, to the, let's say, 250. That's an extreme reduction in salt use. Salt in all forms, right, is corrosive, and all the salt, as Phil said, that we put down, it's in rock salt form, but when it melts snow, it's making brine. So do you want to make, 800 or 500 pounds of salt equivalent in brine per lane mile, or do you want to make 100 pounds of salt, in brine per lane mile? So I think that there's a lot of misconceptions around brine use. And the other thing I would say is that sometimes with our brine, we do have additives mixed in that can make the brine more corrosive. So calcium chloride, Phil mentioned, works down to crazy cold temperatures, right? And so at those temperatures, if people demand bare pavement, we mix in calcium chloride, municipal staff, right? DOTs do. And that does do more damage to our roads and our bridges and our vehicles. So that kind of high powered or that hot mix of brine can be more damaging. But as Aaron mentioned, you can add sugars in to try to cut the corrosivity a bit there. So there is a lot at play, but I'd say, what do you guys say? Like 90, I usually say like 90+% of the time when people are putting brine down, it's just rock salt and water.
Just sodium chloride. And 90% of the time, given, I mean, this is where climate change matters, depending on the market you're in, but 90% of the time, in a lot of markets, that's all you need, actually. I'm even here in the mountains of the Adirondacks, and we've had some really cold temperatures this past week that would require calcium chloride, but most of the temperatures are hovering 20s, and so that's all you need is sodium chloride. Yeah. I would, oh, go ahead, Aaron.
I just want to put one little caveat on that. We make it a 95-5 mix for most stuff. We'll mix a 5% calcium in there. And even when it doesn't need it, I just want to point out so no one has some troubles. Scientifically, yes, you are absolutely right that that's going to treat the pavement. When the temperatures get below 15 at night, though, we've had the sodium chloride freeze in the lines of our sprayers. So then when we go to spray in the morning, they don't work because they're frozen. So we actually use a 95-5 blend for everything, unless we're having real warm spells. But the one drawback of using straight brine is what I'm pointing out there, that you can have it freeze up in your lines at night when you're not using it.
Excellent point. I think though you'll see like state of Maryland. I worked in the state of Maryland for about a decade. There's a misconception also that calcium chloride is less volatile. It is semi less volatile for plant material. It's way more volatile to metals. And so in the state of Maryland, though, everybody's applying calcium chloride bags on sidewalks on time and material or per bag. You don't need it, actually. You don't need it. So just keep that in mind. I'd also just want to help visualize that lane mile application rate you're talking about, Allison. We look at it in terms of 50-gallon buckets. So there's municipalities that were, in our experience, putting down 16 of those 50-gallon buckets per lane mile. A lot of them have cut it down way down to Allison's point, about 6 of those buckets a lane mile. And as they're utilizing more brine, they're able to reduce that down to 3 or 4 buckets. So if you think about a 50-gallon bucket covering a mile versus think about what you're traditionally putting in your parking lot stall or in just your own driveway. A lot of times we're using 25 pounds just on a driveway. These folks are actually able to stretch that, for a mile. Isn't that incredible?
So with that, we're well over with all of our questions, but I appreciate that the audience, a lot of people have stuck around, have continued to put questions into the chat. If you still have a last minute burning question, you can drop it in there and I'll just share it with Phil and Aaron later. And I can then email that answer out. But both Phil and Aaron, I put both of your emails into the chat. There have been requests for that. And there was a request, Aaron, for you to say your phone number one more time.
Yeah, it's 262 373-6564. And don't call me in the middle of the night. I have enough customers doing that. But during the day, go for it. I'd love to talk to you.
All right. So, yes, thank you both so much. This was really delightful, and I look forward to, getting some more feedback from folks, and hopefully you guys both get some good emails, maybe some phone calls as well. So, thank you.
Thanks for doing this.
Yeah.
Allison, thanks for this whole deal. You're doing a lot of great work. So thanks for pulling everybody in.
Thank you guys.